Now, it's my privilege to introduce Rabbi Shmuley Boteach, America's Rabbi. One of the world's leading relationship experts with a focus on Jewish values and spirituality. He's the author of 26 books and host of an award-winning TV show. Rabbi Shmuley is regularly listed as one of the 10 most influential rabbis in the United States. Following Rabbi Boteach, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. There are index cards and pencils on your chairs. Please write any questions you may have and pass your questions to the outside aisles and we'll collect them. The Q&A portion of our program will be moderated by our Federation's very own Director of Jewish Education, Rabbi David Gutterman. Rabbi Boteach, it's truly a privilege to have you here with us tonight.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First, it's a pleasure to speak to a group who do not discriminate against short people. Every place I speak, I spend the first 10 minutes getting on a stepladder to lower the microphone. I think this is actually the first time since my bris that I was not forced to do so. So I'm already feeling large. I'm feeling big. This is going to be a good night, God willing.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. You just said amen. We've got a lot of good religious people here. Wow. Okay. I feel like this is a revival meeting. Yeah. Praise the Lord. Oh yeah. And it's going to be quite a challenge for me to even concentrate on my prepared remarks, given that I now have that very catchy tune coursing through my mind. No one stands alone. Did the Federation write that? That is a really nice song. You know, I've always felt so alone throughout my life. And now I know that even no one stands alone. So if any of you are ever feeling isolated, abandoned, or discarded, if you live with a deep sense of isolation or alienation, just know that it turns out that no one stands alone. And with that, I thank you very much for coming. God bless you, and God bless America. I want to begin by thanking Federation for hosting me, because there is nothing more moving than generous Jews who, with or without a particular religious observance or commitment to Jewish ritual, are still so deeply committed to each other, and who look after the most needy and the most vulnerable. So to speak for Federation is always an honor. I also want to welcome two special guests who accompanied me from Miami Beach, where I grew up prior to upgrading my existence in the great state of New Jersey. And the only reason I live in New Jersey is for the social cachet. Because there's nothing like going to a cocktail party and dropping the fact that you live in New Jersey. My eldest sibling, my sister Sarah, is here with me. She is the mother of 6 children, and she is the greatest sister in the whole world, and I love you very much, and thank you for coming with me, because no one stands alone. And my dear friend Naomi Wilzig, who is a renowned Jewish philanthropist, great supporter of Federation and so many other Jewish causes, and is the founder of Miami Beach's Erotic Museum, is here with me as well. And given Naomi and my having penned Kosher Sex, they say birds of a feather. But Naomi does good things for the Jewish community nationally, and God bless you, Naomi. Thank you for coming with us. About 15 years ago, I received a phone call in my office at the University of Oxford, where I served as rabbi to the students, at 5 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon as I was closing up. And a student said to me, "I have to see you immediately and very urgently." I said to him, "I'll see you tomorrow. Sunday, I'm going home." He said, "It's an emergency." 15 minutes later, an out-of-breath young man arrives in my office, and he says, "My father is not Jewish. My mother is. I was not raised as a Jew. But the doctor of divinity at my college, aka Oxford's fancy name for a chaplain, told him that since his mother is Jewish, he too is a Jew." I said to him, "Okay." He said, "I just discovered that you Jews claim me as one of your own." I said, "Okay." He said, "I don't want to be a Jew." I said to him, "This is the emergency?" He said, "Yes, I'm furious. You can't make me a member of a club that I don't want to join." I said to him, "I had nothing to do with this. Ask your mother." He said, "I'm not leaving your office until you do something about it." I said, "What could I possibly do?" He said, "I've checked on the internet, and you can excommunicate me." So I looked at him and I said to him, "Listen, you know, no Jew has been excommunicated from the Jewish community since Spinoza. That's right, 1648. By the way, I've gotten pretty close with Kosher Jesus this week. We're getting very close. We'll talk about that later. Maybe we'll have the second since 1648. But no Jew's been excommunicated since 1648. And besides," I said to him, "you do realize that we rabbis charge $100 for circumcisions, $200 for bar mitzvahs, $300 for weddings, and $400 for excommunications." He said to me, "Why so steep?" I said, "Because it costs more to get out than it does to get in." He said to me, "Do you have a student discount?" I said, "Of course not. We give you a discount tomorrow. The floodgates open. Every Jewish student in Oxford is going to want to be excommunicated. It's going to be me and my wife for Shabbos dinner. Forget it. No way." He said to me, "Honestly, I have no money." I said, "I'll tell you what. I have to get home. This is a freebie on me just this one time. As long as you don't tell anyone." And I took out my laptop and I typed, "I, Rabbi Shmuley Bateach, hereby excommunicate you and all your progeny from the Jewish people henceforth and evermore." And then I added a little Latin epithet at the end, Kushim Tachas. which is Latin for "this is certifiable as authentic." And I handed him this worthless piece of paper. And he thanks me, he starts to leave. And I say to him, "Not so fast." I said, "There is one thing you owe me."
400.
I forgave the money. I said, "There's one thing you still owe me." He says, "I know what I owe you." I said, "Yes. The answer to the question." He said, "I know the question, and I'll give you my answer." The question was obvious. Why? What was wrong with being Jewish? Why would it offend his sensibilities? And he looked at me, he said to me, They say rabbis are smart, but you are a silly, silly man. You have to ask me why. He says, I'm a historian. I study history here. And I have learned about how the Romans ruled. The Greeks philosophized. The Mongolians conquered. And the Jews died. And died. And died. You're asking me why I don't want to be a member of the most persecuted nation on earth? What a silly, silly man you are. And he turned around and he continued to walk. I said, you must come back for my response. And he stood at the doorway, and I said to him, you're correct. You read about how the Romans ruled, how the Greeks philosophized, and how the Mongolians conquered. You read about them. But to meet a Jew, you picked up the phone. Because we're still here. Because we're not a footnote in history. Because Am Yisrael Chai. Because the Jewish people continues to live. Even as you have chosen not to be a part of it. It's not your fault. No one ever told you why it's significant. So go back to your books and read about dead peoples. But the next time you feel that little itch of Jewishness, you pick up the phone to me again, because I'll be right here. And I never met that student again. Interestingly, I met his mother about 3 years later. She was an editor working at a British publisher, but I never met him again. But his memory haunts me nearly every single day. The fraudulent legacy that has been bequeathed to the Jewish youth as to what Jewish history truly represents. A fraudulent history that seems to be one that is cursed rather than is a blessing. You just see that video of black Jews being brought from Ethiopia to a tiny little nation under siege from 5 Arab states, which at some point in modern times each have declared their hostility and dedication to the extermination of that little state. And we are the first nation in world history that has ever traveled to Africa to take out blacks, not to bring them into slavery, but to bring them into freedom, to liberate them from persecution, to declare that they are our equal brothers in every single respect, bar none. Children of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. I took Al Sharpton to Israel in 2001. He was seen as an enemy of our people. And I was slammed by the New York Jewish community for doing so. You're legitimizing an anti-Semite. It was right after 9/11. And he and I had just done a take no prisoners debate. And I said to him, time to bury the hatchet. They're killing Americans in New York. What are we fighting for? He said, what do you suggest? I said, do something courageous. Come with me to Israel. Visit Jews who have their arms and legs blown off by terror attacks and see that we are a loving nation. And he came and he looked for flaws, and Shimon Peres hosted him with me jointly. At the time he was the foreign minister. And I have to give Sharpton credit. We went to the Hadassah in Kerem Hospital and we met Jews who had their arms and legs blown off. By the way, there was a room we didn't go in. There was a terrorist who tried to blow himself up, and he blew off some of his limbs, but he lived, and he was being treated by Jewish doctors so he could be properly tried, because Israel doesn't have a capital punishment. But nothing moved Reverend Sharpton more, blew him away, than when we took him to an absorption center for African Jews. He was in shock that black Jews were being brought at considerable security risk and expense to live as free Jews in Israel, when he saw black soldiers, Jewish soldiers with yarmulkes walking around with giant M16s defending the Jewish land, it obliterated every idea he had of Jewish racism. And since that visit, he has not uttered a single word against the Jewish community, not one. Because we have been fraudulently portrayed as a nation that is elitist, the chosen people, that is persecuted and dead, as a nation that is materialistic and is the target of the Occupy Wall Street movements, that has a state that is only slightly less hated than North Korea. All of that is a lie. And my purpose this evening is to convey to you just something of the truth. Just something of the intellectual and spiritual gifts of the Jews to the world that has yet to be appreciated. That has yet to be fully embraced. But were it to be embraced, it would bring healing to the United States of America. I'll try to focus on three things in the brief time allotted to us, beginning with this. So we're all inspired by black Jews being brought to Israel because of America's long history of racism. So I want to tell you a little story. On the 3rd of April of 1968, a man who was far from home had a terrible cold and he thought he had pneumonia. So he decided to cancel a lecture that he was scheduled to give at the Masonic Temple in Memphis, Tennessee. He called his dear friend Ralph Abernathy and he said, "You give the speech for me instead." He was in Memphis to protest along with sanitation workers who were being paid below minimum wage, and they were carrying signs that famously said, "I am a man." Well, Ralph Abernathy calls him back a few minutes later and he says, "Martin, there will be a riot if you don't turn up." And there was a terrible storm outside. He said, "I'm sick." He said, "They will tear this place down. They all came for you. It's now late at night. They've been waiting for 2 hours." He collects his tired bones and he walks across with no notes, unprepared, was not even thinking of giving a speech. And that night, Martin Luther King Jr. belts out one of the greatest speeches of the 20th century. And I committed myself to memorizing it in my teen years. And he famously said, "Today, there was on the airplane when I arrived, there was a bomb threat, and they brought the dogs to sniff because some of our sick white brothers wanted to blow up Martin Luther King." And he said, "Tonight, I am fearing no man, because the Lord has taken me up to the mountain, and I have seen the promised land, and I may not get there with you, but I'm telling all of you tonight that you as a people will get to the promised land." The mountaintop speech. My God, an African-American Baptist preacher, on the final night of his life, he'd be dead 20 hours later, cut down by a sniper's bullet, outside room 301 of the Lorraine Motel, where his spinal column would be severed by a single bullet from a white racist named James Earl Ray. And in the last speech he ever gave, he invokes the legacy of the Jews, that there was a man named Moses, and he struggled and fought to get into the promised land. And he led a rebellious, cantankerous, stiff-necked nation through 40 years in the wilderness. And he had one request from God: "After I've done all this, let me just enter the promised land." And God said, "No, you will not. Your successor Joshua will take them in." So then he said, "But God, please let my dead bones go into the land. Let me be buried there." And God said, "No, you will be buried on Mount Nebo in Jordan." I went to Mount Nebo. I looked at the skyscrapers of Jerusalem, the Sheraton Motel, which now is called the Hotel Leonardo, I saw last week when I was in Jerusalem. They've given that 17 different names over the past 4 months. In fact, by the time this video, if it does air on my website, we'll have to correct it and change the name again. I saw that hotel from Mount Nebo, Moses looking into Jerusalem. Greatest Jew that ever lived, and he struggles and he wrestles, and he is not rewarded for the good that he has done. Because the first legacy of the Jews is to do the right because it's right, when there's no reward for it. We have given the world the idea that morality and ethics are pursued for their own right, for their own purpose, even if you are tortured and killed for it. Never in history has there been a nation who have held on their morality with less reason to do so. Our Palestinian brothers and sisters blow up bombs and blow up nurseries, and they tell us the reason is that they're humiliated by Israeli military checkpoints. But God Almighty, they shoved us in gas chambers, and we didn't blow up German nurseries, and we didn't blow up German buses. We held on to our belief in goodness, even when we were tortured and killed for it. We said the Shema Yisrael. We affirmed our faith in God, even in the last breaths of our life, when we knew that we would be put to death for those beliefs. The idea that human beings are born for something other than accumulation. The idea that the word consumer is an insult to each and every one of us, as if we're born to devour. The words inspired, the ideas that inspired John F. Kennedy to famously say in the greatest inaugural speech of American history, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. The idea of doing the right because it's right is one of the greatest Jewish gifts to the world, and we see it in Jewish philanthropy. We see it in Jewish charity. We see it in Jewish hospitality. That's why the greatest people who lived after Moses, they're always distinguished by one thing. They are never rewarded for the efforts they make, and interestingly, they are all inspired by the message of Moses or Abraham. They called Abraham Lincoln Father Abraham. And Abraham Lincoln didn't go a single night during the Civil War without reading the Bible. He said, at night I would get on my knees because I couldn't get any lower. Every general was losing every battle. He tried McClellan. He tried fighting Joe Hooker. He tries Gordon B. Meade. And Robert E. Lee is outsmarting every single Northern general. But Lincoln believes that slavery is an evil that America cannot live with, that a house divided against itself cannot stand, and he's going to keep the Union together come hell or high water. And finally, beginning of April 1865, after 4 horrible years, he gets the message that Robert E. Lee surrenders at Appomattox Courthouse. And he says to his wife, they go for a carriage ride, and he says, Mary, and he had a very difficult marriage because his wife was unstable. He said, he called her Mother. Mother, you and I have not been happy enough these past few years. Now we will finally be able to enjoy greater happiness together. And to start that happiness, he decided to accept an invitation that had been issued earlier that morning to see a play at Ford's Theater. And they take a carriage ride. And here, the American Moses is at the foot of the Promised Land. 4 long years, he's going to finally enter that Promised Land. He's going to finally enjoy the fruits of his labor. And it is denied him at the last moment, just like Moses. And he is felled by an assassin's bullet. He doesn't even get to see the end of the war. Martin Luther King never got to see the triumph of the civil rights movement. Whatever you think about President Obama, and many in our community believe he's not sufficiently pro-Israel, and many believe he is, and I'm not here to give a political speech, but Martin Luther King didn't get to see an African-American being elected president of the United States. He was cut down by an assassin's bullet. Winston Churchill fought Hitler. When he was dismissed as a crank for doing so, the British had just lost 600,000 young men in the First World War. This past summer, I took my kids to the battlefields of the Somme. You have to see, it's indescribable to see. The Somme is a river, and the Somme River Valley, there's no fields. It's just endless graves. It's impossible to describe this. And Britain had just lost 600,000 young men. It led to a whole generation of spinsters. That's where the word came from. Women who were never going to find a husband. And here's Churchill saying, we got a threat, and Hitler's in danger, and we have to rearm. And Chamberlain saying, you're a crank, and you're a drunk, and peace in our time, waving a worthless piece of paper at Munich. But Churchill saying, this isn't going to go away. You can split Czechoslovakia, you can divide Poland, you can do whatever you want. This guy ain't going anywhere until you fight him. And for 6 long years, he saves Britain and the rest of the world from Nazi tyranny. And how is he rewarded? He is immediately thrown out of the Prime Minister's office by the British voters. That is the reward for the truly righteous. The reward is that you did the right because it was right. And it's what you teach your children. It's what you teach your children. That the damned narcissism that is consuming the American soul, where everything is supposed to be rewarded. What's in it for me? Which is suffocating the very soul of this great nation, where we took everything out of the economy, wondering how much more can I take until the whole thing collapsed, because it had nothing left to give. On the final day of his life, Moses gets the commandment from God, the one he's been dreading. He thinks maybe God will finally change his mind. And then we read it every Simchas Torah. And isn't it ironic that on the happiest day of the Jewish year, we read the saddest and yet most moving story. God says to Moses, it is time. And Moses starts to climb that mountain. And he's wondering, at least the people will come with me, right, God? And God says, no. You will walk alone. And he begins to ascend the mountain on his own. And Moses says, and God, the people will come to mourn me, will they not? I'll have an elaborate funeral. There'll be beautiful eulogies, restating all that I did. And God says, no one will even know where you're buried. And then, like silent footsteps in the night, the greatest Jew that ever lived withdraws from the world stage. Abandoned and alone, hungry and desolate. And no one knows where he is buried until this very day. Because to be a Jew is to do the right, because it's right. I went with my father when I was a boy to Israel. And we were going to drive, when it was still safe to do so, from Jerusalem down to the Dead Sea and then up north to Tiberias and to Tzfat all in one day. It was very easy because it was only an hour by that road. Now you have to go all the way around. And it's 11 a.m. and there's a checkpoint. It's 110 degrees outside, summer at the Dead Sea, lowest point on earth. I'll never forget this. There was a redhead soldier with red freckles all over his face. And there's a checkpoint, and he asks us where we're going. We tell him. He waves us through. We came back 6 hours later. We had a great day dealing with the heat by jumping into the Kinneret. Going to the cool spaces of Tzfat in the Galilean mountains. And after that day of pleasure and fun, we drive back, and there's a checkpoint. And there's a redhead, freckled Israeli soldier who was still standing in that oven-like heat. And I said to my father, I'll never forget this, I said, why is he here? I was wondering how he even could have survived. And my father looked at me and he said to me, because he is a hero. He leads a life different to us. He is a hero. He is a hero without a spotlight. They will give him no reality TV show. The big American sponsors aren't going to give him some deal. You're not going to see him on the back of Wheaties. But he is a hero. That is the first legacy of the Jewish people, to do the right because it's right. And it comes from the very first story of Adam and Eve. The very first story in the Bible is of a man and a woman who mix up their values. We always focus on the fact that when Adam and Eve eat from the forbidden fruit, we look at the sin of Adam and Eve, but that's not the real story. The real story is the unhappiness of Eve. The insatiability of Eve, not Adam. Adam doesn't do anything wrong. They're frolicking in the garden completely naked. And they don't have anything. But they're happy, or so it seems. But somehow the serpent sees that Eve is dissatisfied. Otherwise, he would have seduced Adam. He would have gone to Adam and said, "Are you happy? Isn't there something you still don't have?" But he actually can tell that Eve is not happy. By the way, we can see it today. The glaring unhappiness of women is one of the great mysteries of modern life. Just look to the women to your left, and they're thinking, "Why did we invite him? I'm very unhappy. I was unhappy before he came. Now I'm miserable." Stephen Hawking was asked on the occasion of his 70th birthday, the greatest physicist since Einstein, and I had the honor of hosting him at Oxford. He's quite an amazing man, actually. You know, he's totally debilitated. He can't move his arms, but he loves babies. And our daughter, Rachelea, who's today 13, thank God I remembered her name and her age. I have 9 children, thank God. Unless we've had a few since I left, I haven't checked. He played a synthesizer when he said he wanted to hold the baby, but he can't move his arms. So his wife took our baby and tied his arms around the baby. And he held her. We have these beautiful pictures. He loves babies. But he was asked, if you saw it, became an international story. About 4 days ago, he was asked on the occasion of his 70th birthday, what is the greatest mystery of the universe? And he said, women. Now, the unhappiness of the modern woman goes back to ancient times, but it's become much more pronounced in our time. Firstly, women are never happy with their appearance. They're always dissatisfied with their appearance. And if they're married, they're especially dissatisfied. Because studies actually show that married women, on average, are 24% heavier than single women. This is true. Because the single woman comes home and she checks what's in the bed, what's in the fridge, and then she goes to bed. But the married checks what's in the bed. I'm not even going to finish that one. Women today, just so that you remember our progression, I'm speaking about the great contribution of the Jewish people being dissatisfied pursuit of good. Women today are so dissatisfied with their husbands that I do this poll wherever I go, so dissatisfied with men. It's incredible. I've done this all over the world, and I'm going to do it quickly now. A simple question just to the women. Raise your hand. No, I'm not going to ask if you're miserable. I know you are already. Raise your hand if you are a woman in this audience, and this is a very precise question, so please listen carefully. Raise your hand if you are a woman in this audience who needs a man. Now, before you answer, I did not ask you to raise your hand if you can stomach a man. And I did not ask you to raise your hand if you can survive a man. Raise your hand if you need a man. Okay.
Depends on the man.
Just look around the audience. Look around the room for a moment. You know, not only, you know, a moment ago there weren't even two hands, there were half of two hands. If you add them together, you get one hand. Now, why is it that everyone's answering the question like, you think I asked, raise your hand if you have a venereal disease. So we don't have a single woman in the audience? By the way, I saw a man raise their hand. That's okay. Live and let live. That's okay. There isn't one woman here that needs a man? One. Which one? Two. Two. We've got two women. Three! We have three. Four! Oh my God! It's spreading like an epidemic. That's because the husbands are looking at... Okay, now why is it that the women here will not raise their hands to admit that they need a man? In fact, I have a follow-up question. Raise your hand if you're a woman and you need a refrigerator. Okay, so what we have here is an admission on the part of the women that they prefer a piece of metal that can cool their milk rather than a piece of flesh that could warm their heart. And the reason? Because GE brings good things to life, right? Who just asked me that? What? Same question for the men. You want me to be fair? Okay, it never works. I've tried it. In other words, you want me to now ask the men, raise your hand if you need a woman. The reason it doesn't work is that every time you ask a man, raise your hand if you need a woman, what he hears is, raise your hand if you want sex right now. Thank you for proving my point. I appreciate it. This is a family-friendly lecture, by the way, or at least it was. But that's interesting. That the men take it as a sexual question, as if men are very sexual and women are not. Isn't that fascinating? We now believe that women are not as sexual as men. In other words, today, the husband will say to his wife, how about some sex tonight, honey? And she'll say, not tonight, I have a headache. And yet the man can have an axe lodged in his head. And he's ready. So why are women unhappy today? Just like in the time of the Garden of Eden. Dissatisfied. They don't need a man. Eve is cavorting around the Garden of Eden. Where's Adam, by the way? How is she even susceptible? I mean, there's only two people. She's doing everything she can to, like, I need some alone time, Adam. And the serpent can see she's unhappy. And he takes advantage of her unhappiness by injecting something new that will become a curse to Adam and Eve and their children forever. He looks at her and he says to her, why are you unhappy? And she says, I don't know. I seem to have everything I need. And he says, really? What about that tree? What about that tree over there? What does it taste like? And she says, I don't know. It's forbidden. And he says, really? Then how do you know you're happy? Maybe the pleasures and delights that that tree has to offer are of such a magnitude that it would make everything that you have pale by comparison. You think you're happy in your neighborhood? What if there are homes and neighborhoods you can't afford that actually would change your life completely? Vacation destinations that you've never visited. Or husbands who are so much more attentive, who can actually give you what you need. And Eve comes home and now she's not smiling anymore. And Adam says, "What's wrong?" And she says, "I don't know, but I'm feeling a certain emptiness." And nothing has changed for women ever since. They can't fully explain it. And that's why Stephen Hawking, he said it as a joke, but I gotta tell you, Sigmund Freud said it for real. Freud was asked in 1938, "What haven't you answered about the inner workings of the human mind, the deepest, darkest secrets of human psychology?" And he famously said, "I don't know the answer to, what is it that a woman wants?" Smartest man of like a early 20th century, late 19th century, he also couldn't figure women out. And men tell me this all the time. They come for counseling and they say to me, "You know, Shmuley," and the woman starts to complain, and she'll say why she's unhappy, why she had to drag her husband for counseling, and he'll always say to me, "She's insatiable. Nothing will make her happy. Nothing will make her happy." I am here tonight, one time only. You're very lucky to be here. To finally answer that question. I am going to tell you once and for all, what is it that a woman wants? And I'm going to do it because I am that rare man who is deeply in touch with his feminine side. The mistake that every husband makes is to believe that his wife wants to be loved. So he showers her with affection, and he compliments her, and he makes her feel cherished, and still she's unhappy. And then he begins to give up because he says, "Women are a mystery to me, I can't make her happy." And they begin to live separate, isolated lives, and both of them are lonely. Contrary to what that song said before. Even in marriage, the loneliest women I have ever met are married women. If a woman wanted to be loved, she would have stayed with her parents. No one will ever love her more than her parents. You think her parents are going to sit her down and say, "Stephanie, we don't want to tell you this, but we've decided to divorce you." Her parents are never going to cheat on her. Her parents are never going to go to Margaret, the next door neighbor's little girl, in the middle of the night and say, "Margaret, you're the girl we really love. Here's a secret present, but don't let anyone," and erase all your cell phone records so no one knows we've been in communication. Why do women leave the loving bastion of their parents? Why do they risk rejection from a stranger? Because that stranger can give them the one thing that every woman wants, more than anything else. A woman wants to be chosen. And her parents can do everything but one. They can love her, but they can never choose her. When your mother tells you you're the prettiest girl in the whole class, you know that she has a genetic shotgun to her head making her say it. You don't believe her. But when a stranger who could have said it to 50 other girls in the class says, "You're the prettiest girl in the whole class," you believe him because there was nothing compelling him to say it. It must be the stranger who chooses you. Because being chosen means you are unique. You are special. There's no one in the whole world like you. Eve is unhappy because Adam could give her everything except what? What could he do? He couldn't choose her. There was only one woman in the whole world. They say that Adam was the happiest man that ever lived because he had no mother-in-law. But like that famous story that a guy comes to a rabbi and says, "My mother-in-law died. What was what's allowed in Jewish law, embalming, cremation, or burial, and the rabbi says take no chances. Do all three. That's a joke. Please invite me back. It's a joke. But the truth is that Eve is miserable because Adam cannot confer upon her the feeling of chosenness. And she turns to materialism to fill that void. And it's happening in a lot of marriages today. The husband gets distracted with his stuff and comes home and veges in front of the football game, and his wife feels empty and unloved and unchosen. And she assuages the pain with the impulse purchase, shopping. Shopping is the #1 cure for depression in America, even more than Prozac, Zoloft, and Paxil. Americans spent $54 billion on Black Friday, and there was that woman who pepper sprayed 20 people to get to an Xbox. Ladies and gentlemen, the first gift of the Jews is a belief in disinterested good. And the second follows from the first. The Jews taught the world that when you pursue disinterested good, even if you don't have a material reward, or even if you suffer for it, you get life's greatest gift. You feel chosen. You are the only one who can do it. There's a corner of the world that only you can redeem. You think that when you give money to a charity, you're doing them a favor? They're making you feel essential and chosen. If you don't help this boy, nobody will. It is you or it is bust. Why do you think we're not called God's beloved nation? Christians call themselves that. We are God's chosen people. And it doesn't mean that we're better than anyone else. Let's reject this idea that Jews are elitist. It means that we believe we're chosen to do good. We're not chosen to consume. We will not be seduced by this forbidden fruit in the belief that there's anything we can buy that will ever bring us happiness. It's Bubba Mises. You can have $1 million bar mitzvah. You can destroy the spiritual character of that celebration. You can show off to all your friends how much money you have, and you will feel like crap afterward, I guarantee it. But if you feed someone who has no one else to feed him, and if you clothe someone who has no one else to clothe him, and if you comfort someone who has no one else to comfort him, you will feel chosen, and your life will suddenly take on a specialness and a meaning that it never had before. There was a man named Viktor Frankl, and he was a psychiatrist in his 20s, and they took him to Auschwitz. He was married for a year, separated him and his wife, and he lived through that hell for 4 years. When it was over, he penned what would have to be considered one of the 5 most important books of the 20th century. I try to read it every year, and I try to read it out loud to my kids every year. In fact, I read it to my wife out loud, which she really enjoys, when I'm not watching football. Dolphins aren't worth watching anymore. Shmuley was bad enough, the mothers-in-law. Come on, don't start with the Dolphins. And Viktor Frankl says in Man's Search for Meaning, that he got up every morning in Auschwitz to the work detail. You know, I wish I had it in front of me because it's of such power that just thinking about it moves me. And he got up in the work detail and it was freezing in Poland. And he had no shoes and he would try to tie some fabric to the bottom of his feet. And the work was meaningless. See, the Nazis were brilliant at human psychology. And this week's Torah reading, Parshas Shemos, and I hope you'll all go to synagogue to read this. It's the story of how we became slaves in Egypt this week. And Pharaoh made us build cities on Pithom and Ramses, which were slime pits, so that everything we built fell into the earth, so we couldn't take any satisfaction from the work. That's how you make a free man into a slave. You remove from him the pleasure he gets from work. You show him that his work is useless, so he just begins to work for the sake of work. Jews, they gave them meaningless work that would slowly enslave the mind. And he felt one day that he could not continue. And he felt that he had to die. and that he was going to die. That he was freezing, he was starving, and he had no dignity. He was defecating into a bucket in front of 30 other men. And he was branded like cattle on his arm. And he suddenly says, at that moment, I thought of my wife. And new life began to course through my veins. And I finally understood, he writes, the meaning of the poets and the troubadours and the minstrels, that only through love are we redeemed. And it is only through the knowledge that you are loved that you can choose to live again. And he started thinking about his wife every day as he walked to work, and it was the knowledge that she loved him that sustained him. And you know what? She was already dead. He didn't even know she wasn't even alive. It was the mere thought that someone needed him, that his wife pined for him, that his wife ached for him. We all need to be needed. We want to be wanted. We desire to be desired. That's why living a life of disinterested good is the highest happiness. By any measure, the United States, based on its stated goal in the Declaration of Independence, is a failure. And I love this country more than almost anything in the world. If you're a Jew who doesn't love America, you have lost the plot. This is the greatest country of all time. God bless America. But Thomas Jefferson says in the Declaration of Independence that it was created for the pursuit of happiness. And yet we are the most depressed nation on earth. America consumes 3/4 of the world's antidepressants. 3/4. Washington Post statistic. And the reason? Because the only thing that can bring happiness is a feeling of chosenness. All the narcissism that's being peddled in America, that you need this to be happy, and you have to have this person's name on your tuchus to feel that you're not anonymous, and you have to have a new car every 3 years, etc., etc. This never leads to happiness. The only thing that leads to happiness is when your girlfriend is having problems with her husband and she picks up the phone to you and she needs your comfort. And it's when your children wait for you at home to be read a bedtime story. And it's when your kids need you to be at the dinner table, without which the whole table feels empty. And it's when your grandchildren know that you're not feeling all that well, but you got on a plane to visit them and they run over to Bubby and Zadie. And you feel necessary and essential. That is the only thing that brings happiness in this world. And that's what Viktor Frankl wrote in that book. He said that purposefulness leads to contentment that leads to happiness. That is the great gift of the Jews, that everyone wants to be chosen. That's why women get married. Otherwise, marriage is the worst deal. I mean, when you think, look at it on paper, marriage positively sucks. Just think about this for a moment. If you're a woman, here's what marriage is. First thing you get is to lose your name and take someone else's. That's quite a sacrifice. Next, you get to cook and clean for someone. Yay! Next, you get to have the kids. Your body is the one that gets deformed as your husband's telling you to lose weight. Yeah, okay, I'll do that. Then you get to nurse the baby at 3 a.m. And for all that, now you're competing against, get this, because I wrote a column for the Wall Street Journal that's being published, God willing, in either tomorrow or Monday. It's about declining American values and why America is such a religious country, but our values don't seem to be as good as our faith. 92% of Americans believe in God. But listen to this. But as a woman, as a married woman, you're now competing against $32,000 spent every second on pornographic websites in the United States. $32,000. And there's 4.2 million porn websites. For women, of course. That's a joke, by the way. So why would a woman do all this? Because it grants her that one desire that she has that is so wholesome. To be chosen. To be the center of someone's universe with a planet revolving around you that needs you. Someone to whom you are essential and necessary. And that's why marriage is the most blessed of all institutions. It's something that we don't focus on in the Jewish communities as much. We've made peace with marital breakdown. We've made peace with kids being yo-yos, going back and forth between parents. But it really is a blessing. Hillel was asked by a convert, tell me how I can become a Jew by learning the whole Torah standing on one foot. And Hillel famously said to him, that which you hate, don't do unto others. He didn't say the many things that you hate, don't do unto others. He said that one thing, that one big thing, that thing that you hate, never do unto others. And what is the thing we most hate? The greatest human fear is that you are ordinary. The greatest human fear is that you are not special. And we spend our lives negating that fear. I got into Harvard, I am special. I started an internet company and I sold it for millions of dollars, I am special. But the lesson of Judaism is that there's nothing you can add on the outside that will ever make you more special or less ordinary. It is only virtue you accumulate on the inside. That's what a mitzvah is. To live with good deeds. Something that could never be stripped from you. And that's the lesson of the Adam and Eve story. That Eve's dissatisfaction could never be cured by anything that she could eat on the outside. This interested pursuit of goodness, the pursuit of chosenness, and now let me conclude. By the last great gift of the Jews, so that we have a spiritual and intellectual legacy to bequeath to our children that isn't about Jews dying or a tragic history, it's a glorious history. There's one more thing that Viktor Frankl said. He said, I learned something in Auschwitz that has remained with me for the rest of my life. And by the way, let me interpret further. You know what's interesting about Frankl? He died about a decade ago in Vienna. There were 4 great Jewish writers that survived the Holocaust. But 2 of them committed suicide. One of them is a truly great man, but he's broken to his core till today, which is why his books are so moving. And then Viktor Frankl emerged whole. Bruno Bettelheim became the world's most famous child psychologist and killed himself. Primo Levi became the most haunting chronicler of the Holocaust and then killed himself. Decades after! Elie Wiesel is, in my opinion, like the greatest living Jew. I have the great honor and pleasure of counting him as a friend. He has taught me so much. He is the glory and prince of our people. But he's a broken, haunted man, and who can blame him? But Frankl was whole. And I think this is the reason, the third gift of the Jews. Frankl said there was something I learned in Auschwitz that I never could have understood previously. He said, the Nazis robbed me of every freedom while in Auschwitz. They took away my human dignity. They took away my hope by gassing my wife. They took away my faith by making me question God. They took away my freedom by incarcerating me behind barbed wire. But there was one thing they could not take from me, and that was the choice as to how I would respond to what they were doing to me. He says that in life we all think there's an action and a reaction, cause and effect, and he says it's not true. The essence of Judaism is that there is cause, choice, effect. There is always a choice. However fleeting, however infinitesimal, there's always one moment where you can choose how you will respond. Our Muslim brothers and sisters, and we must remember how good the Muslims were to Jews for many centuries when they took us into the Ottoman Turks after our expulsion in 1492 from Spain, 1498 from Portugal. Let's not say that Islam is a militant religion that hates Jews. That's a lie. But the problem with our Muslim brothers and sisters today is they say there's cause and effect. We're humiliated by the West, we strike back. We're humiliated by Israelis, we blow up buses. No. There is cause, choice, effect. You are never robbed of choice. And it's the most important of all Jewish contributions because it's the one that is most under assault. All of evolutionary biology is telling us today that there is genetic predetermination. Your genes lead you in a specific way. For example, men are not naturally monogamous. They're not. Robert Wright wrote a book called The Moral Animal where he says that why should adultery continue to be considered a sin when men are programmed to inseminate as many women as possible? That's how the species continues. But we reject that, and we know that men are not animals. Men are not bulls that you put into a pen. We expect men to honor their commitments to their wives because there is cause, choice, and effect. Even Freud denied choice. He spoke of the id, deep, uncontrollable urges that were in the subliminal parts of the mind. Our Christian brothers and sisters deny choice. They say that only a belief in Christ, nothing that you do with your actions, can bring about salvation. That was one of the reasons that I wrote this book. Believe me, I'm not here to promote this because the book isn't even here. It's not even being released until the 1st of February. But given that I have come under withering critique and assault this week for people having just heard the title, there is such a necessity today amidst this new alliance between Jews and Christians to demonstrate the Jewish origins of Christianity and how everything Jesus taught is so easily traced back to Judaism before it was distorted by later Christian writers to blame the Jews for Jesus' death, which became the greatest lie ever told, and one that has spilled endless Jewish blood. But our Christian brothers and sisters, and it took me 10 years to write this book, and people are judging me without even knowing anything about it, but I got to tell you, our Christian brothers and sisters deny choice too. It is belief that sets you free. It is your dogmatic faith in Jesus as Lord and Savior that's going to take you into heaven, not any mitzvah, not any good thing you do. But we Jews, we don't give a damn what you believe. We couldn't give a damn. I probably know more atheist Jews than I know religious Jews. And you still have to do a mitzvah. And you still have to give tzedakah. And you still should have a mezuzah on your door. Because we judge people by their actions, by their choices. The choice maketh the man, not your beliefs. And that's why, to conclude, that's why tzedakah is the most important of all Jewish mitzvahs. The one that makes you feel the most chosen. Because whereas our Christian brothers and sisters call charity from the Latin word caritas, which means heart, because for our Christian brothers, you give because you feel with your heart, you feel the plight of the poor. In our religion, it's called tzedakah. Justice. You're walking down the street and you see a guy and he's asking for money and you're thinking, I don't feel much for you, get a job. We don't care what you feel. 10% of what you earn is not yours, period. Give it away, because you can't keep that which belongs to somebody else. God has been very good to you. Now, 10% of what you have is not yours. We don't care what you feel. And the same thing is true of marriages. So many husbands and wives come to me with broken marriages, and they talk about feeling love, and I say to them, that's the problem with your marriage. Marriage is never about what you feel. It's about how you express what you feel. It's how you show what you feel. And the same thing is true about being Jewish. It's great that you feel Jewish, but our people need those who do something about it. That's why, as I conclude, for the 5th time, you know what amazes me about Federation? I'm an Orthodox rabbi, and there aren't a lot of Orthodox rabbis who lecture for federations. I seem to have noticed. For whatever the reason, maybe because the Orthodox have charities that they focus on more, whatever it is, I'm always amazed that the vast majority of Jews who are involved in Federation are not very observant. But boy, are they generous. Boy, do they give a huge amount of tzedakah. They love Israel. They love their fellow Jews. They hear the Jews are in trouble and they cough up whatever they can, and they're amazing. And you guys inspire me. You make me into a better rabbi, you make me into a better Jew, you make me into a better human being. I always leave Federation events uplifted and inspired. Because you would expect, okay, the Jews who yarmulkes and beards, okay, so they're doing things. But it's actually the Jews who may not be as observant, but who have the most unshakable commitment to our people that are just amazing. I hope you'll stay in touch. If you go to my website, shmuley.com, there's a free mailing list. I do 3 columns a week, Wall Street Journal, not always the Wall Street Journal, but Huffington Post, Wall Street Journal, when they take it, maybe once a month, thank God. The Jerusalem Post once a week on Tuesdays. Many other newspapers. I write 3 columns a week. I hope you'll get on. My passion is to spread universal Jewish values to heal America. And if you ever want to know more about it, you can easily approach me. Please support the Federation. God bless you and have a very good evening.
Is clearly one of the unique gifts of the Jewish people.
Wow.
Thank you, Rabbi. That was inspiring. That was inspired. At this time, I'm going to ask everyone
That is
to
the
also...
nicest thing anyone ever said to me. Is my mother here? Did we speak to her? Anyway.
Now that he said that to me, I guess I can say to him that I've actually done kosher sex with Shmuley.
Whoa! I thought I got in trouble for this. Okay.
That's right. We're not being taped here, right? I mean, Rosemary works at Center here. We over there. By the way, I thought it was deliciously ironic that the author of Kosher Sex mentioned Joseph Hooker, but Yasha Kola for that. By the way, friends, keep on writing the questions. We're going to pass it down to the aisle over here. At this time, I also have the honor of also drawing the raffle this evening. Where's Dana? Oh, we're coming here. Maybe we'll have Rabbi Shmuley put his hand in the basket, because after all, Moses also began his career as a basket case.
This guy's sharp.
Yeah, you've inspired me.
I just want to make sure I get the one that has my sister's name on it. One second.
Taking glasses off. The winner of the raffle, by the way, it's one of the wonderful books authored by Rabbi Shmuley, is Mr. or Mrs. Jacobs from Highland Beach, Florida. I don't have a first name here. Please come on up and Rabbi Shmuley will give you one of his books. Are you here? Here she is, Mrs. Jacobs. Can we see a photo of ID? C.R. Jacobs, Ocean Boulevard. Come on up and get the book. Okay. As the questions are coming in, my friends, I just want to kind of remind us this evening of what our great inspired teacher and speaker and preacher taught us this evening. I share with you, I heard a rumor that it's a political season. So I'm going to hazard the guess by throwing out to you a story. It's a little bit political, but I think you'll get the point here. I don't like name dropping, but it's a wonderful book. Have you read the book? It's called Name Dropping by John Kenneth Galbraith, one of the great economists of the world, advisors to presidents going back to John F. Kennedy, all throughout. He also passed away a few years ago. He tells an incredible story. He said once he was called into the office by President Johnson. And Lyndon Johnson, as you know, was that powerful president of the Senate back in the Texas days. And he said, Ken, I got to tell you the story. He said, an oil lobbyist walks into my office, and he said, Mr. Senator, if you and the boys vote a certain way on this oil depletion tax bill, then I think me and my boys could come up with $10,000 for your re-election campaign. And Johnson said, he said, son, you're in the office of a United States Senator. I hear you, Mr. Senator. If you and your boys vote a certain way on this oil tax depletion bill, then I think me and my boys can come up with $50,000 for your re-election campaign. And Johnson said, son, you're talking about downright bribery in the office of a United States Senator. I hear you, Mr. Senator. If you and your boys vote a certain way in this oil tax depletion bill, then I think me and my boys can come up with $100,000 for your re-election campaign. Johnson said he got hot under the collar, he pressed a button on his desk, his aide walks in, takes the guy by one arm. Johnson said, I was so agitated, I took the guy by the other arm, opened the door, and I chucked him out, and I said, son, don't you dare come back here. You're getting too close to my price. My friends, we as a Jewish community have a price, and the reason that the Jewish Federation of South Palm Beach County is still here and that we all are not alone, we are together as a family, because until every single person that needs the food that Rabbi Shmuley spoke about gets it, we are not there yet. We still have our price. Until everyone is clothed or has a Jewish education, or until every Jew in Israel is safe and secure, until that day happens, we as a people are here we have reason to be here, and it's only together through the commitment that you share with us and the shared vision that we have as one global people. And by the way, that expression that appears, and we know the song Am Yisrael Chai appears also this week, and I know that you'll go to Rabbi Shmuel's shul this Shabbos. It's in this week's Parsha Shmos. Interestingly enough, it wasn't pronounced by God toward the Jewish people as an honorific, nor was it given by Moshe Rabbeinu Moses as the great epithet of what the Jewish people are. The term was actually, believe it or not, bestowed on the Jewish people by the enemy of the Jewish people, Pharaoh. He understood what it is that makes us unique and special. We are Am Yisrael, we are one people, one heart. The needs of one Jew anywhere affects the Jews now. You know, it is Martin Luther King Day coming up. He did say something extraordinary that moved me a lot, and it still does. I'm going to do it tomorrow with my students at the school. He said something brilliant, almost Jewish. He said, what affects one person directly affects all people indirectly. Dare I do this? Because the way a Jew would have to read the statement would be the following. What affects one Jew directly affects all Jews directly. That's why you're here this evening. We thank and we are so honored that Rabbi Shmuel Boteach, our great teacher, our great speaker, is here this evening. Do you have time for a few questions? Let me throw out a couple here. Oh, boy, this is dangerous. Well, how do we look at the questions first?
Wait a minute.
Oh, this is interesting. You know, I like a little Lashon Hara myself. This is an interesting question. The question is, are you in the running to become the chief rabbi of England? Has nothing to do with the topic, but, you know, inquiring minds want to know.
I would consider becoming chief rabbi of Great Britain, if not for the fact that it's an incredible demotion from being the chief rabbi of the galaxy that I was appointed to by myself, and I really couldn't afford the pay cut. No, that all started about 2 weeks ago. I went to a conference in England, 5-day conference. I gave 5 speeches in 5 days. 2,500 Jews, which 1% of all British Jewry were there. It's a big conference. That would be the equivalent of there being 60,000 Jews in the United States at a conference. There was all this speculation, because I lived in England for 11 years. And British Jewry are very different to American Jewry. And we all have something to learn from each other. We can learn a lot from them, they can learn a lot from us. What they can learn from us is that we stand up very proudly for Israel. We have no problem openly lobbying our government for Israel, pressuring our government, as we should. This great nation should stand up for democracies that are fighting for their lives. That's what America's about. The French came to the aid of the fledgling American democracy in the Revolutionary War. And if you didn't have French warships outside of Yorktown, we might never have defeated the British, certainly at that battle. Cornwallis's route of escape was blocked by the French. All great nations should help fledgling democracies, let alone all the other ties that exist between the two nations. But in Anglo-Jewry, there's a greater reluctance. They're always afraid, given that it's Europe, that these moves will excite anti-Semitism. So, to the extent that I have any interest in being the British chief rabbi, because they're looking for a new one now, it would be primarily to fight the battles of our people in a continent that is increasingly lost to us. And we are losing Europe. And the outbreak of anti-Semitism in Europe in general, and Britain in particular, is nothing short of staggering. And it's hard to watch, and it's hard to understand why the Jewish community doesn't do more. And I'm not being critical of the Jewish community. They live with this, so they're more cautious about it. I'd love to show this to you, but I can't because my sister's holding my phone. No, do
Your
it.
phone died.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, then I can't show it anyway.
No, I don't mean it like that. You can't video on your phone.
Oh.
They said it has too much video.
Yeah, you want to see what happened today? This happened today. I was walking on the boardwalk in Miami Beach, and as fortune would have it, I was dictating letters to my assistant. So everything that happened was recorded because he heard it through my earpiece. These two guys came over to me. Look at his face. My tzitzis were flying. I was walking. He came straight over to me and he said in a deep French accent, "Why don't you go back to Israel?" I never believe in backing down in the face of anti-Semitism. This is 3 hours ago. So I got in his face as much as I could, and I said, "What did you say?" He said, "You Jews, go back to Israel." I looked him in the face and I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Police! Hate crime!" And I took out my phone and I put it in his face and I said, "These pictures will be on the internet tonight, telling everyone in Miami Beach to look out for you." And then they started to run away after they confronted me and he was going to hit me. I said, "Hit me." I said, "It's worth taking one punch to see you in jail. Definitely worth it." I said, "Hit me." Then they started to run away because they saw a police car. I chased them on the beach. That's why you have all these pictures. The disappointing part was they ran away, and I finally found 3 cops on bicycles on the boardwalk. And I told them what happened, and he said, "What did they say?" I said, "You Jews should go back to Israel, dirty Jews." He said, "Oh, that's First Amendment." I said, "What?" "That's First Amendment." I said, "Officer, with all due respect, I'm a radio host, I'm a TV host, I talk about this stuff all the time. The First Amendment does not protect incitement to violence or it does not protect incitement. And I'm amazed that you would say he didn't even care." So I went to his superior, I went to a major of the Miami Beach Police, and I asked these guys where they're from, and they said that they are from France. The whole thing is taped. I'm wondering what to do with it. But this is in Miami, and we could feel very confident that we could stand up to these bullies, because thank God we lived in the United States. But if you're a French Jew wearing a yarmulke, walking around, I was just in Paris this summer with 4 of my kids. I, of course, wore a yarmulke everywhere. I'm not going to be bullied by these people. But a lot of Jews feel very uncomfortable. In that respect, I would have an interest to go back to England for some years, perhaps. Not for the 20-year stint, which is normally the chief rabbinate, but 8 to 10 years to help the community there, to the extent that I could, and to fight anti-Semitism, stand up for Israel, and inspire greater pride among Jews, because I feel we're losing that battle. The question is whether the chief rabbi of the United Kingdom could do those things, whether he would be given the latitude, the freedom to do those things, or whether they just want someone who speaks on the BBC. That's not my style. I will get in the face of people who are haters of our people, and I don't believe in backing down. I actually believe, and I wrote a well-known column on something called "No Tolerance for Intolerance." We can never let things like this go by, because once you do, it grows. You have to show that you will not allow it. That's why I endorse the policy of the State of Israel that if there is a terror attack, Israel responds the same day by blowing up terrorists and their training camps, because you need to show that this won't be tolerated.
Thank you, Rabbi Shmuel. Thank you so much. My friends, I think the hour is late. There's going to be a fine collation here in the back. Rabbi Shmuel is going to be, unbeknownst to him perhaps, but he's going to be here. He's happy to talk with you.
I'm selling books.